Have you ever noticed that strange, almost involuntary reflex we all seem to have at the end of the day? You turn off the lights, you pull up the blankets, you tell yourself you are finally going to get a good night's rest. And then, as if your arm has a mind of its own, you reach over to the nightstand and grab your phone.
It is the universal modern reflex. And honestly, it leads to what I believe is the single most revealing question anyone in the health and wellness space could ask you today. It is incredibly simple. What is the absolute last thing your brain sees before you close your eyes? And exactly how long is that device in your hand after you actually get into bed?
It is a terrifying question when you really force yourself to answer it honestly. For millions of us, the answer isn't a book or the ceiling or just darkness. It is a glowing rectangle. It is a feed of endless videos, a barrage of text messages, breaking news, work emails, and a flood of social media notifications.
Exactly. And modern neuroscience is starting to paint a very disturbing picture of what that specific habit is doing to us. Because that single behavior, lying in the dark, bathed in the artificial glow of a screen, reveals so much about our baseline health. It is a direct window into nervous system overload, dopamine overstimulation, and the complete disruption of our circadian rhythms. We are looking at a society suffering from chronic recovery failure. Modern humans are no longer just sleep deprived. We are biologically overstimulated to the point of exhaustion.
Biologically overstimulated. That is a powerful way to frame it. Because I think most people just assume, well, I'm tired, so I'll eventually pass out. But you are saying that the smartphone is quietly hijacking the actual mechanics of our sleep. It is not just delaying the time we fall asleep. It is fundamentally rewiring our nervous system and our hormones.
That is precisely what is happening. To really understand the gravity of this, we have to look backward. For the vast majority of human history, nighttime meant one thing: darkness. Our entire nervous system, our biology, evolved around the reliable cycle of sunlight by day and absolute darkness by night. Darkness wasn't just the absence of light, it was an active biological trigger. It signaled the brain to initiate recovery, to release specific hormones, and to begin deep nervous system repair.
So our bodies essentially use darkness as the ultimate on and off switch for cellular repair.
Yes. But then, almost overnight, in the grand scheme of human evolution, the modern smartphone completely shattered that biological rhythm. Today, minutes before we expect our brains to power down and heal, we expose them to bright, concentrated light. We expose them to intense emotional stimulation, social comparison, and rapid-fire dopamine signaling. We are creating a massive circadian conflict.
It is like we are stepping on the gas pedal and the brakes at the exact same time. The body is exhausted and screaming for rest, but the eyes are telling the brain that it is high noon and we need to be on high alert. Let's break down the mechanics of that, starting with the light itself. We hear a lot about blue light. What is actually happening in the brain when that specific wavelength hits our eyes at midnight?
Blue light, specifically the short wavelength light emitted by our digital screens, is a major disruptor. When that light enters your eyes, it hits specific receptors in the retina that communicate directly with the brain's master clock. And the message it sends is very clear. The sun is up. This completely suppresses the production of melatonin.
And melatonin is the hormone that essentially opens the gateway to sleep, right?
Exactly. It is one of the body's primary sleep-regulating hormones. When you suppress melatonin with artificial light, you are not just making it harder to fall asleep. Research shows you are reducing the overall depth of your sleep, shifting your entire circadian rhythm later into the night, and severely impairing the structural quality of your rest. You are essentially starving your brain of the chemical signal it needs to shut down.
So the brain interprets the smartphone as artificial daylight. That alone is fascinating, but I have to imagine the light is only half the battle. Because reading a physical book under a bright lamp doesn't seem to leave people feeling as wired and anxious as scrolling through a social media feed in the dark. There is something about the content itself, the rapid switching of context, that feels uniquely exhausting.
You hit the nail on the head. The light is the biological trick, but the content is the neurological trap. The problem is the intense psychological stimulation. Social media platforms, news apps, even our email inboxes, they are masterfully engineered around novelty, high emotion, and variable reinforcement. They operate on the exact same psychological principles as a slot machine.
The dopamine loop. You swipe, You don't know what you're going to get. You get a hit of something funny or enraging, and then you swipe again.
Precisely. The brain's dopamine pathways are heavily engaged. Every single swipe creates a cycle of anticipation, uncertainty, and reward prediction. This keeps the nervous system incredibly activated. Dopamine is a molecule of motivation and pursuit. It is designed to keep you seeking. You cannot have a hyperactivated, dopamine-flooded brain and expect it to smoothly transition into deep, restorative sleep. It is neurologically impossible.
Which perfectly explains that incredibly frustrating phenomenon so many people experience. You hear it all the time. I am so physically exhausted. My bones ache, but my brain absolutely refuses to shut down. The mind is just racing a million miles an hour.
That is the exact symptom of the mismatch. The physical body is depleted, but the nervous system is stuck in a state of hyperarousal. And this brings us to a really critical layer of this issue: the anxiety and emotional overload connected to nighttime phone usage.
I want to dive deep into that, because the nighttime scrolling isn't always happy, right? A lot of it is doom scrolling. It is reading arguments, looking at terrifying news out of context, or looking at people whose lives seem perfect, which triggers massive social comparison. Doing that at 1 o'clock a.m. in a dark room feels like a recipe for a psychological crisis.
It absolutely is. Research is increasingly linking this excessive nighttime digital stimulation with severe mood instability and emotional dysregulation. When you are taking in news overload, constant notifications, and engaging in social comparison right before bed, you are keeping your nervous system in a low-grade survival state. You are triggering the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline at the exact moment they should be at their absolute lowest.
It is almost like we are voluntarily inviting a predator into our bedroom every night, just in digital form. The brain doesn't know the difference between a physical threat in the room and an emotional threat on a screen. It just knows it needs to stay awake to keep you safe.
That is a brilliant way to put it. The brain prioritizes survival over sleep every single time, and the tragic part is the vicious cycle it creates. Poor sleep directly impairs the brain's ability to regulate emotions the next day. It makes you more sensitive to stress, more anxious, and less resilient.
And what happens when we feel stressed and anxious the next day? We reach for our phones to soothe ourselves, to distract ourselves, which leads to more screen time, which leads to another night of terrible sleep. It is a devastating loop. Poor sleep increases stress, stress increases phone dependence, and phone dependence further destroys sleep.
Exactly. And the consequences of this loop extend far beyond just feeling a bit groggy during your morning commute. The body pays a massive compounding price. We are talking about severe impacts on metabolism, immune regulation, hormonal balance, and systemic inflammation. Chronic sleep disruption is a slow-motion health disaster.
I think people often view sleep as just a passive state, like turning off a car engine to save gas. But it is not passive at all, is it?
Not in the slightest. Sleep is the most active biological repair process your body undergoes. It is when your brain clears out metabolic waste, when your tissues repair themselves, when your immune system builds its defenses. When you let a smartphone compete with that crucial recovery window, you are interrupting vital maintenance. You aren't just losing time, you are actively accumulating biological damage.
This makes me think about the rise of wearable technology. We see so many people tracking their sleep now, looking at their resting heart rate, and specifically looking at their heart rate variability, or HRV. Why is HRV such a crucial metric when we talk about this nighttime digital overload?
Wearables are fascinating because they often reveal the invisible stress the body is carrying long before our conscious mind realizes we are burning out. HRV, the variation in time between your heartbeats, is one of the most accurate windows into your autonomic nervous system. A high HRV generally means your body is resilient, relaxed, and recovering well. A low HRV means your nervous system is strained, stuck in that fight or flight sympathetic dominance.
So if someone is doom scrolling in bed until 2 o'clock a.m., their wearable is going to pick up on that stress immediately.
Without a doubt. You will see the sleep fragmentation, you will see the resting heart rate stay elevated much later into the night, and you will see the HRV absolutely tank. These metrics reflect the profound nervous system strain associated with late-night stimulation. The body whispers long before it collapses. It is giving us the data, showing us that we are failing to recover.
That phrase is striking. The body whispers before it collapses. It really frames the magnitude of what we are dealing with. It makes me wonder if looking at this merely as a sleep crisis is too narrow. Maybe what modern society is actually facing is a full-blown recovery crisis.
I firmly believe that is the true nature of the problem. Think about the modern human experience. We are subjected to continuous visual stimulation, continuous information processing, continuous emotional input. There is almost no point in a 2-4 hour cycle where we experience true neurological silence. The nervous system is never allowed to fully power down and recalibrate.
We have completely eliminated the empty spaces in our lives. The time we used to spend just staring out a window or lying in the dark waiting for sleep to come, those were the moments the brain used to process the day. Now, the second we feel a hint of boredom or quiet, we fill it with a screen. We are terrified of the silence.
We are, and we are paying for it with our biological resilience. If the brain is constantly processing input, it cannot engage in the deep, restorative work it needs to do. We are treating our nervous systems like machines that can run indefinitely, but we are organic creatures bound by ancient biological laws.
So, knowing all of this, knowing that the light suppresses melatonin, the content hijacks dopamine, and the constant stimulation ruins our HRV and recovery, how do we actually fight back? We can't just throw our phones into the ocean. What are the practical, real-world strategies to reclaim our nights?
The interventions are surprisingly simple, but they require discipline. First and foremost, you have to create a digital buffer zone. You need to drastically reduce screen exposure 60 to 90 minutes before you intend to sleep.
A 90-minute buffer. That sounds incredibly difficult for most people, but I imagine it is non-negotiable if you want to fix the biology.
It is the most effective lever you can pull. During that time, switch to warm, dim lighting in your home. Read a physical book. Stretch. Listen to audio. Do things that do not emit blue light or trigger high emotional responses. You must avoid emotionally stimulating content late at night. No heated debates, no tragic news stories, no intense social media scrolling.
What about the physical location of the phone? I know so many people who use it as their alarm clock, which guarantees it is the last thing they touch at night and the first thing they touch in the morning.
That is a habit that has to break. Keep the phone completely out of the bedroom. Buy a simple, old-fashioned digital alarm clock. If the phone is on your nightstand, the temptation is simply too great, and even the subconscious awareness that it is sitting right there, full of unread messages, keeps the brain on alert.
Out of sight, out of mind, or at least out of the immediate nervous system environment.
Exactly. And the final piece of the puzzle actually happens in the morning. You need to expose your eyes to natural morning sunlight as soon as possible after waking. This anchors your circadian rhythm, telling your brain that the day has officially started, which in turn helps set the timer for melatonin release later that evening.
It really all comes down to sending the right environmental signals. We have to actively teach the brain that night is still night. We have to recreate the darkness and the quiet that our biology expects.
That is the perfect summary. We have to protect the nervous system's transition into the dark. Because biology still remembers the rules of nature, even if our modern culture has completely forgotten them.
It forces you to look at that piece of glass and metal in your hand completely differently. Your smartphone is not just a neutral tool. It is not just a communication device. It is a powerful environmental signal that is actively influencing your brain chemistry, your hormonal balance, your nervous system, and your fundamental ability to recover from the stress of being alive.
It is. And when you understand that, you realize that one of the most profound and important health decisions you make every single day happens right at the edge of your bed. Every night, you have a choice. You can choose to allow darkness and silence to heal you, or you can allow artificial stimulation to slowly break you down. You are the architect of your own biology.
What a powerful thought to leave on. The choice between darkness and stimulation. It really makes you question what you will reach for tonight when the lights go out.
I hope it gives people the perspective they need to finally put the screen down and reclaim their rest.
A deeply necessary conversation. Thank you for breaking down the science behind the midnight hijack so brilliantly.
My pleasure. The body is always ready to heal. We just have to get out of its way.